Welcome to the Stop, Breathe, Feel, Create podcast. You're listening to an Igniting the Flame episode where I, your host, Lauren G. Koch, have conversations with light bringers, change makers, and creatives. Today, I have Katie Hovencamp on. She is a powerhouse artist and professor based in Bethlehem, PA, who teaches a variety of sculpture and printmaking classes in the Lehigh Valley area at Hampton Community College and Moravian University. And let me tell you, the Fab Lab where she teaches is a state-of-the-art facility complete with a Martin guitar luthier school, laser cutters, 3D printers, full-out metal and wood shop, silicone and resin mixing facilities with all the best smooth-on materials, and so much more. I love going up and visiting. Katie and I first met in 2015 at the International Sculpture Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. We've been setting things on fire together ever since, including bringing iron pours back to Bethlehem still on a much smaller scale than back in the day, of course. And let me tell you, Katie has had quite a journey as an artist, educator, and mystery illness warrior just like me. And I'm so thankful to have her as a support buddy through all of the things. Shoot, she's even rushed me to the ER before when I was a visiting artist one time and started experiencing stroke-like symptoms, and come to find out it was a hemiplegic migraine. But enough of that. Let's get started and let Katie share her story. The first thing I'd love to talk about is your art journey and how you even started wanting to become a professor.
Well, I've always been interested in working with my hands and making art, and education was something that was always kind of in the background when I was going through schooling. So originally I grew up in the Poconos in Northeast Pennsylvania, and the original plan was, okay, I'm going to go to school, semi-locally or just, like only a couple hours away. And then I kind of had a curveball thrown at me. My mom was at the time spending a lot of time with a friend in Phoenix, Arizona. And she said, why don't you look at Arizona State? And then, my mom was just kind of like on my case about applying to Arizona State and wouldn't leave me alone. I was like, fine, I'll apply. Just get you to leave me alone about it. All right. And then, so one thing after another happened, like with the other schools. Like I got into 3 out of 4 of the ones I applied to, but then weird things happened with the other 2 that just didn't make things work out well. Like they were going to delay some things with my degree program. And then another one, like I kind of lost out on a scholarship deal. And then ASU turns around and gives me pretty decent amount of scholarships to go. And it ended up being cheaper to go to out of state school in Arizona than it was for me to go to school in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up going to Arizona State, kind of begrudgingly, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going all the way out here. And like, I didn't see the school, I kind of went out there semi-blind. And then, Arizona is way different than Pennsylvania. I mean, like climate wise, I thought I was going to die the first year I lived there. Because, I go from, cool summers, relatively mild summers to like, cold winters to extreme heat, and it was intense. But then, I made it through the first year. It was a little bit rocky because I was going to transfer, but then I decided to stick it out. And a lot of changes happened at that time. I wasn't an art education major. And then I took my first 3D class and I absolutely went head over heels in love. And then I started taking sculpture, and then I decided I really, really liked sculpture. I worked with Mary Neubauer, and she got me hooked on working with metal. First metal class I took with her was welding, and I'm still addicted to welding to this day. And, but then I took, after school was over, I spent a year teaching in Phoenix. So I started working at an art center called the Edna Viles Center for the Arts, which was like a city type art center. And I worked there for a year, and then I just decided, what, I'm kind of missing my family. Like everybody's in the Northeast and I'm kind of alone in Phoenix. So, and my mom was kind of getting sick at the time. So I decided, maybe it's best for me to go back. So I went back, Spent 2 years working in New York City because where I live was only an hour and a half from New York. So I'd commute. A lot of people in my area tend to work either in New York or Philadelphia and commute. And I did that for 2 years until I decided, I really want to go to graduate school because mainly I want to be a better artist. I really like making art, but I felt like there was stuff in my practice I really wanted to know more about. So I went to Penn State and got my MFA in sculpture, 2-year program. And then about 6 months after that, I started teaching at Harrisburg Area Community College, and I've been teaching at various colleges ever since. So I taught there. When I was a grad student, I taught at Penn State main campus. Then I taught at Keystone College for 5 years. Now I'm Northampton. I'm there for almost 4 years now. And now I just started at Moravian University as well. So I kind of jumped around a lot of colleges in the area, but I really enjoy it. I just, I think the most important thing about education is just working with students because students always surprise you. And I feel like as an artist, they kind of keep you in check about being fresh, so they keep me on my toes as far as like what's going on and, kind of how I have to recalibrate and think about things. Especially now that I'm a generation older than most of my students, I'm going to quote the whole Gen Z thing. I don't know why all the generations are kind of like pitting themselves against each other on social media. I still don't understand that whole thing. I'm like, can't we all just exist and be here? Like, but because I'll even have some of my students say, "Oh, you're such a millennial." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's my age. It's just who I am. So what's the big deal?" But that being said, they do keep me in check and they teach me things too. So they'll teach me about like the TikTok trends and whatnot. So I appreciate it's synthetic to educate me.
Yeah, for sure. I know that I've definitely experienced the same thing regardless of what age group I'm teaching is, you end up learning just as much as they do during the class. But you teach a lot of very technological advanced like 3D printing and laser cutting and stuff, and I'm more analog, so I'd love to hear how you've sort of stayed up to date on some of those trends and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's kind of like what the students are looking to do. And then luckily where I work at the Fab Lab, if there's always somebody that I can grab and say, hey, I know you've had experience in this, how did you do this? Or, I'll take the initiative and look up how to do it myself online. Because initially I started off very analog too. Like I didn't really start doing more of the digital stuff until I started working at Northampton. So we're talking like 4 years ago was when I really started upping the game on the digital end of things. And then, because I have to use that equipment like every day, that's just kind of how I'm staying up on it. And then plus, when you have to help students with stuff, they kind of throw some surprise curveballs at you or they'll ask the machines to do things that, you're not entirely sure they're capable of doing sometimes. So sometimes I'll do the disclaimer. I'm like, we're going to do a test piece. We're going to try it. I can't make any promises, but we're going to see what this does. And then, sometimes it does or does not work out. Like, we kind of tested the limits a lot last semester. I had one student that really liked to push the boundaries and most things worked. Other things did not. But, it's also a good teaching moment for the students too, because they need to be aware that not everything's necessarily going to work out all the time in studio. I keep telling them, like, if you look at my studio, I could show you a pile of disasters I've had. I mean, it still happens.
Yep, you've got to have trial and error because you never know what's going to happen. The best laid plans always seem to either they work out great or they completely turn into a disaster.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, you've got that right.
Besides learning some technological things, how are you keeping your offerings fresh? Because you teach printmaking and sculpture. What is that the main two subjects that you teach?
Printmaking I haven't taught as much lately. Like I taught that like about 2 years ago now, but lately it's been more like 3D focused, but for the exception of Moravian, where I'm teaching like a 2D design
Okay.
type course. So, and the way I keep it fresh is like I make sure that I keep my presentations like really well diversified, whether that be like artist age or generation or background or, where the artist is coming from. So, I try and make my presentations so they're relatable to everybody as best we can. I'm a huge fan of showing Art 21s in
Oh
class
yeah.
too. Like I think that is like one of the best tools because it gives you a really good insight on the artist and kind of like shows you how they tick.
Hmm.
And I think it's important for students to see that and see how everybody kind of works a little differently too.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Have
But
you?
really, it's the students that kind of keep me in check. Like, when I'm going over something, if they have a question or they're like, oh, do you have anything from like artists from background X or this or that, so then I'm like, oh yeah, hold on, let me pull up these people.
That's awesome. How do you
Yeah.
keep sort of up to date on some of the new artists that are coming in or like the new shows and stuff like that?
You know what? Like, I know Facebook's kind of dead in a lot of senses, but like, as far as just kind of, like networking and just kind of seeing what's going on, like that, and like Instagram, those are really good tools just to kind of see like what's going on and trying to get out to shows as much as you can too. I think in general that's really important. Or shows that you can't necessarily get to but are like really crucial. Like I think the spring break art shows are really important because they're showing a lot of like emerging and up and coming artists that they're not super well known yet,
Mhm.
or they're like just kind of getting established. So that's kind of a way to see people that are, coming up fresh and just kind of seeing the trends in the art world.
Right.
So, yeah. And I just think kind of being aware of what's going on in like certain areas too, because like New York art scene is way different than like LA art scene,
Oh,
you
for
know?
sure.
Mhm. So kind of like, what's happening in the areas and there's stuff kind of like happening all over the country. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have to be in a major city to, have a successful art career. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I live close to two major cities, but do I have a desire to live in either one of them? Not really, because I like to be able to get around when I want, and I feel kind of restricted in the city. And plus, since I'm a sculptor, I need space, and space is cheaper when you're in more of a suburb or small city.
Yeah, for sure. And that reminded me of the special feature that you have in your new basement in Bethlehem. You want to tell them about that special little room?
Yeah, so I have a really crazy basement that from the house I just bought. So my house has a lot of historical meaning. It was a Bethlehem Steel manager house. So every house on my street belonged to some sort of Bethlehem Steel manager. And then, across the bridge, which is what we call South Side, that's where a lot of the workers lived. And, Bethlehem Steel is a huge part of the history of this area. And something that's kind of funny about my basement is one way you can enter it is there's a door that comes from outside and it goes down. It's a Bilco door. And then what the steel worker would do is they'd go in the basement and they'd get tidied up before they'd go upstairs into the kitchen and just the regular part of the house. So my basement has like a laundry room and it has just a bathroom, but it's just a toilet. It just was there. And then, we had to install a new sink because the old sink was all busted up and didn't work. And then further down in my basement, I have a pretty significant amount of space. So I'm turning it into a workspace so I can do a lot of like grimy sculpture work down there. So my basement's a pretty cool space. And I mean, I love my house and it's cool. It has that history, but it was kind of hilarious to find that when we
Yeah,
bought
for
the house.
sure. It's like the OG mudroom.
Oh, yeah, definitely the OG mudroom.
Tell me a little bit about your artwork, sort of how you started creating or at least going down that path, because at times it can be controversial or at least very thought provoking.
hmm Yeah, I mean, when I started making my artwork, I was very much interested in material and just kind of how it acted. And then as things evolved over time, I thought about, how I can use my work to really think about the larger conversation. And one of the things I was always concerned about was like how women were perceived or, just trying to, achieve equality in some way, shape, or form. So over the years, I've used methods where they become more of like a dark humor, and that tends to be where I pull a lot of my work from, just because I think, you can catch the viewer more by being initially sweet. And then once, you really start investigating and seeing what's going on, it gets a lot more like insidious or dark, or, sometimes there's just kind of, I call it like a sucker punch,
Mhm.
with my work. And I think that it makes the work more relatable when I work in that manner because, you lure the viewer in, but then, you understand once you look at it, there's something more complicated beneath the surface usually. So, a lot of my work that does that, I think about like these food weapons that I've been making lately, where I'm taking like an item of food and I'm turning it into like a physical weapon that you'd either see in like medieval times or something that's like a little bit more contemporary. Like I have an idea I'm working on right now. I want to make like a handgun, but that's a hot dog that's kind of limp and like really sad looking. So, so kind of commenting on like, the gun culture and all of that, but then also being humorous by using a hot dog, a very sad looking hot dog at the same time. So that's something I'm planning on casting in iron pretty soon. And, I've also made like a landmine pie, and then I've done a cupcake bomb. And I tend to work in metal quite a bit just because like I like the heaviness and the rigidness in the material and trying to make something that's like really pretty or ornamental out of it. Just to kind of reflect on how, you can make something that looks delicate but have it actually be really strong. And I think that's kind of like a deeper metaphor with how I perceive myself in a lot of ways because, you know, um, medically I'm kind of fragile these days. And then, even prior to that, I'm, for those of you who don't know me, I'm 4'11", and a lot of people tend to be surprised when they find out, oh, I'm the sculpture teacher and I teach welding and metal. And, I usually get a double take whenever I teach like one-on-one classes at the Fab Lab when I have, these kind of industrial mechanic-y guys that want a refresher on welding. And then, they see me come up and I'm like, I'm your welding teacher. They're like, what? So I guess in some ways, like the work's kind of like, don't underestimate women, don't count us out just yet. We're a lot more strong than you think we are.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And do you think that some of the body of work that you made during grad school and stuff like that sort of moved into this? I know you were using your body more during that time period. Even in general, like the way that we create is so physical, but this was also putting yourself through like very like you could have ended up with frostbite or something at
Oh
that
yeah.
point in time.
Yeah, and I still see the body, like not necessarily always my body in the work, but I always see a body in the work, I am interested in bringing myself back in again, and there's some things I have in the works that I'm planning on doing that are a little bit more performative, but they're definitely kind of like more surprising acts. Like, one piece I'm working on right now, and it's going to be really, kind of funny. But I've been thinking about the whole act of, conducting a dinner, like a fancy dinner, like a
Oh,
Thanksgiving and
wow.
all that. And I was thinking, what if I used my tool background to actually make dinner one day? So, I'm thinking about getting a chainsaw and carving a turkey and, like taking a reciprocating saw to a ham and, just taking my tools and just kind of going to town on it and making a meal that way. So that's one of the performances I'm thinking about right now. So, I've been developing that and sketching ideas out in my studio. And now it's whenever I do a performance, I have to kind of rehearse it for a little bit and just, record myself and, see how things are going. We're having a performance night at Soft Machine Gallery sometime in March. So I'm planning on doing it for that. So I do have a deadline for this. So I warned them too. Luckily, John and Eva, who run the Soft Machine Gallery space in Allentown, are really good friends of mine. And they asked me about performance night. And I said, okay, can I do something that's really messy? And then I told them what I wanted to do. Like, do it. I'm like, okay, cool. So,
It's incredible that you have support like that. And
yeah,
it's
it's
nice
really
that
good.
they have the concrete floor and stuff like that, so it could be easy cleanup.
Yeah, yeah. So that's good.
Hmm. It's really wild how the Lehigh Valley and Bethlehem, specifically in Allentown, have started becoming like this little hotbed for art
Mhm.
in general. And what would you say would cause that, if anything? Is it like economical space? Is it room to spread out? What do you think is causing people to come out from the city more?
Well, I think initially COVID was a big draw because this area, it's we're nestled between Philadelphia and New York. And then, a lot of people from New York and New Jersey are moving over because our taxes are a lot cheaper and, cost of living out here is cheaper. And then the city itself's like really kind of historic and cute and charming. So I think a lot of people like just kind of like the aesthetics of the area and how it has like, there's parts of Bethlehem, it feels like you're stepping into the 1700s,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people like that. And then, we're also, as far as like the art scene's concerned, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of people that thinks art's really important around here. So funding is pretty good. We have two hospital systems that actually donate a lot of money to art programs. So we have St. Luke's and Lehigh Valley Health Network, and they give out grants to do like huge projects. Like a friend of mine got $20,000 to do a giant mosaic mural in the hospital.
Nice.
And then, we constantly have calls for mural projects around here. And then we have a yearly public art project, which, we have a sculpture that rotates at the visitor center. So every year, an artist gets selected and they get $7,500 to put their piece on loan for the year, and it gets switched out for every steel weekend.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's nice program for artists. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities around here to grow. And then again, because we are close to New York and Philadelphia, it is really easy to access those two cities because they're both only an hour and a half away.
Hmm. And there's even like bus systems and stuff that come
Oh,
out pretty easily
yeah.
because the casino and everything.
Right. Yeah. We have the buses. And then even if, you want to do Philly, there's buses from Allentown, but you could even drive down to Lansdale to the train station and hop the train down as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually, I mean, this is kind of like the big plans. They've been talking about this for many years, and I hope it eventually comes to fruition. But they've been talking about a train line it's supposed to be an Amtrak that goes from Allentown to New York and
Oh,
then
wow.
to Philly eventually. And then there's even one that's supposed to go from like New York to Scranton too. Like, so, that's been in talks for many years. I hope that eventually happens because I think a lot of people would really like that. But one thing that would happen is I think our population is just going to skyrocket after that happens.
Yeah, no doubt. They need to do one between Frederick and Bethlehem so that I
That'd be
can
sweet.
so I don't have to drive every time.
I know, right? Right.
With working at Bethlehem still area and the history that is there, we also have the international, no, not international, but the national um, Museum of Industry, right there.
Mhm.
Um, how has that really impacted how you show up in the community, and has this has art and manufacturing kind of found a space to coexist in Bethlehem, do you think?
I think so. We have a lot of folks at the museum and then with Arts Quest that are super excited about art and how industry kind of intersects with it. So, our museum interim director, her name is Andrea Zaya. She's super enthusiastic about art and has been really consulting me and several other folks in the area about more ways to kind of, bring art to the museum. And so they've brought in some artists with like independent projects. We have whenever we have Steel Weekend, we have an art exhibition that runs in conjunction with it at the Arts Quest Center. So the show just came down yesterday, and we're planning next year's show, which is going to be Women in Steel, is the theme for next Steel Weekend. So that's going to be a really fun one. And yeah, I mean, I feel like with my personal practice, it's been great, collaborating with the museum. Our friend Mike Pierce always seems to be excited to take on new projects or just kind of try anything, which is great. So we've been able to have iron pours there, bring in many artists, including yourself, to do some really fun projects and, just get some new metal work made. And a lot of students from like the local universities want to be involved. And, we have faculty and people kind of tend to show up out of the woodwork with iron pours, which is really nice.
Right.
So I just got contacted by Lehigh University to see if they could jump in. They said, we went out in on this. Come on. I was like, all right.
Nice.
So yeah, with Lehigh. And then, I'm hoping to get more Northampton and Moravian students involved too.
Nice. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And y'all have a lot of, I don't know how much you dig into it, but like Kutztown and all of the Pennsylvania Dutch art and like folk art and stuff that's around. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of really interesting colleges with some really unique histories in the area. And, Bethlehem's like a really big college town because we have Lehigh, we have Moravian, we got Northampton, and then not too far away, we have like Muhlenberg and Cedar Crest. And then Kutztown's like 40 minutes from here. And, and Reading's not too far from here either,
Right.
and then you've got Alvernia and RACC and, there's another call, Albright's out there. So
Okay.
we have pretty big variety of schools in a pretty small radius, which is neat. But really, like, we're kind of collectively collaborating with a lot of folks to make iron pours happen here. So, we have folks coming, a big group from Maryland.
Mhm.
And then, we have some from Pittsburgh, we have some from Alfred, and, some from Jersey and New York. And, we have people that want to come out as far as like West Virginia. So
Oh
it's
wow.
pretty exciting to see,
Yeah.
all these artists kind of showing up for this. So I feel like, if we eventually just say to the iron community, hey, we're having an iron pour, I think we wouldn't be able to fit everybody is,
Mhm.
is, is the issue. Because that's one thing we're working on with the next iron pour is, we figured out pretty quickly, like, yeah, we really need more space. Like this is really, getting big. So,
Yeah.
you
May
know,
take over one of the big parking lots instead of
I feel like
cubby
that's what we
holes.
got to do. I'm gonna tell them that actually we're meeting tomorrow and say like, hey, I think we should just hijack a parking lot because it's getting big.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Within that realm, especially iron pour stuff and dealing with all of your health issues, I know I've had to take a huge step back myself. How have you been able to accommodate both your physical size and strength levels, but also maintaining like this super active exhibiting career and building all of these wonderful community experiences like the Iron Pours at Bethlehem?
This last year, I kind of had to scale back my activity quite a bit and really kind of like be selective and pick and choose what I could and couldn't do because, my health took a really nasty turn. Like the worst of it was really like March. And then July, I had another bad hit as well. We'd be here all day if we went through all my medical ailments. It's one of those like hold my beer moments.
Right.
If I disclose every single thing I went through. But basically the short version is I essentially had to kind of start from the ground up as far as like my health was concerned because just a lot of things went wrong all at once. And long COVID definitely threw a nasty monkey wrench into things too. So that meant a lot of prioritizing my health. So I had to do I finally sat down and tallied it up. I've been in physical therapy since May, and I just graduated physical therapy right before the holiday.
Wow.
So I've been in physical therapy and doing that. It started off 3 days a week, and then it went down to two. And then I prioritize walking too. So every day I make sure I walk 2 miles up and down hills and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, and then just making sure I'm like eating right, making sure I'm hydrated. So all those things I have to check off first before I can tackle anything else. So, as far as like, my exhibits, I didn't do quite as many this year. Like normally I do about 15 a year as far as like my group shows go. And I did about 11. So, scaled back. And then as far as like making work, I took it really slow. I made some pieces, but I focused more on like the 2D stuff this go around just because it was a little easier for me to do as far as like my stamina because I was having a lot of trouble with like dizziness. And that didn't really get resolved until toward like the end of the year because I unfortunately got a concussion in May and that took a while to recover from and still kind of recovering from aspects of that because the impact affected my jaw. So I have TMJ that I'm doing physical therapy exercises for, and I have like a night guard I'm picking up tomorrow. So hopefully this will get
Yeah.
resolved in a few more months. But it's still I'm still very much a work in progress. But the key is I'm taking things as they come. So like if I'm feeling good one day, I'm like, okay, I could chip away at something a little bit in the studio, but then I also have to listen to my body and say, okay, I'm feeling myself getting worn out. I better stop, So as far as like deadlines and things for getting ready for shows or getting new works done, I'm making sure I'm giving myself like really big cushions of time
Mhm.
to get it done. So that way I can really pace myself. So that's the name of the game is just pacing myself. And then, eventually if I can work at a, faster pace, that'll be great. But I'm also not going to like, force myself into this box. Like I have to be this way by this point in time because that's where I'm going to run into trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And as far as like equipment and stuff,
Mhm.
like I know when you get new leathers and gloves and stuff, you have to get them altered or whatever
Oh,
because the sleeves
definitely.
are way too long. Can you talk about how, especially within the industry, it sometimes isn't as accessible, like whether the size of the tools are too big for certain hands
Oh,
or
yeah.
stuff like that? Tell me how that you've navigated that as well.
Well, as far as like the actual equipment, my friend Molly, who lives down the road from me, she works at the Fab Lab as our one of our sewing and textile instructors. She knows how to sew leather, thankfully. So she's helping me alter my new jacket because I ended up I bought two jackets. The first one I got was basically a welding dress. Like it looked like it should have been for somebody in the NBA. And there was just no way. It was way too material. I probably could have even made a second jacket out of all the
Mhm.
leftover material from that one. So I sent that one back and I got one that was a little better, but it still needed a significant amount of altering in the sleeves. And so she's working on that for me. So, I have to go to the tailor. And then as far as the tools and whatnot, so this sometimes I have to begrudgingly ask for a friend. In fact, I have a rivet gun that is way too big for my hands because I have these tiny little mitts here. And I usually have to have someone rivet gun with that gun for me, or I have to just kind of look for a smaller one, or just kind of adjust the way my body is using the tools so I can actually use it. Angle grinders seem to be pretty okay for me and drills and whatnot, but it's usually like those smaller, like hand tools where I kind of run into problems. But, for the most part, like that's pretty okay. But Yeah, it's funny when you like working with those kind of processes and it's not necessarily made for someone of my body type,
Mhm.
but make it work.
Yep, for sure. And I mean, I'm full like head and shoulders taller than you, and I still had to like adjust my height when I was working in most of the studios because they don't accommodate, different height sizes. Everything
Mhm.
in the industry is kind of built for 6 foot tall guys and stuff like that. So it's definitely quite interesting for sure.
Oh yeah.
Do you I've had to go to like anti-fatigue gloves and boots and stuff like that as far as the tendonitis and stuff. Have you found any brands that you really like as far as PPE?
Yeah, for my little hands, I really like the Angel Fire gloves because they also contour your hands really well because they a lot of times with the standard welding gloves, I feel like your hands are just kind of sitting in like these sacks and
Mhm.
these like fit your fingers a lot better. Tillman, I got a welding jacket from them and I just have to adjust the sleeves. Otherwise, it seems to fit pretty okay. Um, as far as my boots, I have to have like men's size 5 for my shoes. And I got Viachrome boots that are slip-on metatarsal, and heat resistant. So I use those for iron pores. They tend to work well. And then as far as like, because I'm a new glasses wearer, I just started wearing glasses this fall. I've gotten those glasses that fit really nicely over your current glasses. And actually, I found a cheap pair on Amazon that work pretty well, which is
Oh,
good.
nice.
Yeah. Um, as far as the other stuff, it's just been like pretty standard. I've actually had like relatively good luck finding gear on Amazon, surprisingly. Um, and then sometimes like I'll shop at Airgas. Cyberweld has really good
Mhm.
prices on their gloves. So I usually buy my welding gloves from there.
I usually end up getting a full case because it's always hard to find like a size medium or something. So I always try to go ahead and get 5 of them because or whatever, because I tend to with charging and, running the furnace, I always burn through them, so
It's so easy to do.
yep.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some enjoyable moments that you've had from being inspired by your students or
Mm.
just in general, like, having fun in the studio.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think one of the best moments as a teacher is when you have a student that's kind of like apprehensive of either like the subject matter or apprehensive about using a tool. And then you see them kind of like embrace it and then start getting comfortable and then seeing them kind of like come into their own and like, that moment where I can like step back and say, okay, I don't need to watch them like a hawk so much on the
Right.
tool because I know they know what they're doing. Like I'm still there. I just kind of like distance myself. I'm like, all right, I'm here, but I know you're gonna be okay. Um, so that's really always an exciting moment because I'm like, yay, they're doing it. They can do it on their own. Or, you know, um, I have students that are coming back from previous semesters saying, like, hey, I want to be a Fab Lab member and work in the studio. And, I'll see them around doing things, which is really exciting. And also too, like, because I've taught professional practices type courses for the
Mhm.
school as well, and seeing students like come back and like asking me questions like, "Hey, I'm in this show. What do I do?" Or, seeing them like take your advice wholeheartedly and just running with it. That's
Yeah.
always really nice to see, and just seeing them kind of like you know become their own artist is really the best.
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah.
And as far as, like, anyone that's listening to this wanting to get into an art career or at least exploring their creativity, what would be some advice that you would give someone that's just starting out?
Several things. I think first I want to say is every artist really needs to get good at writing. Writing is something that I know not necessarily everybody wants to do, but it's super important as far as, when you want to apply to shows, like art, they want to know about what your work's about. They There's times if you're applying for grants or funding for your work and arguing why, something needs to be funded. Writing really comes up a lot. Having really good online presence, I think, is really important too. So I think I'm a big advocate of Instagram, actually. When I taught my individual studio class, it was like the professional practices. I actually required all the students to have an Instagram because what's nice about Instagram is it's a quick way to kind of network with somebody and then, have your work right there. So to me, Instagram's like the handshake. And then your website's like, okay, you're getting close to the person. We're comfortable enough. I can give you a hug now. So it's a good way to kind of get more in depth about what you do. But it's important to have both and then doing your best to kind of regularly update it as much as you can. I'll admit I'm not like 100% the best at social media. Like I'm good at keeping stuff on there and keeping the page interesting, but I'm not somebody that like regularly posts. That's actually one of my New Year's plans. Like, okay, I'm going to try and do a little better at social media. I'm not going to like, go crazy, but I'm going to try and do some more reels and whatnot and, get a little more video content in there because people seem to like video a lot lately. That's what my students tell me all the time. So
Gotta stay hip, Katie.
I gotta stay hip. They tell me all the like the new terminology and everything. I sound really old saying all this, but they they do. Like the other day, I had students in my class because we had a workshop with Chakaya Booker at Moravian, and we were making books. And I made my book, and I was really happy with it. And my two students came up to me and said, "You ate and left no crumbs," and I was like, "What?" And then they explained it to me. They're like, "No, that means like it was really good, and you kind of slayed it." And I was like, "Okay, that's what that means."
That's hilarious. Yeah, I definitely the past couple of college level classes I've taught, I've had a language barrier that I've had to start overcoming, and it's hard enough for me to process words anyway. So when I have zero context, it's like, what's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean that's why I like my Northampton classes because I mean Moravian I tend to say have like a pretty like standard age demographic. Everyone's like right around the same age. Whereas Northampton, because it's community college, you're getting people from all over the place. So, in fact, my next semester coming up, I've got two returning students. They're both in the boomer generation. And then I've got I've got a couple millennials and I've got a couple Gen Zers. So this is going to be, a cool little mix. I like it when that happens. So
Awesome. I really appreciate you doing this, and it's been great to like discuss and sort of see how things are changing and growing as far as the art experience in the Lehigh Valley and just what you're bringing to it, because it's truly amazing to watch some of the things that you're doing and everything. Um, do you have anything really fun or exciting besides the little performance that you were talking about earlier that you have on your plate coming up?
well, something I'm trying to conspire to do and seeing like first off if my doctors think this is okay. I want to attempt traveling
Mm.
sometime this year. Uh Ideally May because that's a good time because school's over until the beginning of June for me because I usually teach a summer sculpture session and I'm hoping to go back to Ireland and Scotland. I did a residency at the Tyrone Guthrie Center several years ago. And when you're a resident there one time, you get an open invitation to go back. So I'm thinking about doing it. So I have to talk to my doctors, say, like, hey, you think it's going to be okay for me to travel in May? And, what do you think? And, so if they give me the okay, I'm going to see if I can do this. I'm not going to hold myself to a super stringent timeline, if they're like, no, maybe next year. So I'm kind of being loose with that, but that's something I'd really like to do. So that's on my radar. And eventually I got to get to Germany too. I need a Germany redo because when I went to Germany and I presented at the last International Conference on Contemporary Cast Iron Art. I unfortunately had food poisoning. So
Oh
I didn't
no.
really get to enjoy the conference. I just barely got to see downtown Berlin. And then I presented and then like went back. So people didn't really see me at the conference because unfortunately I was very sick.
So
So
that's a twofer. You also in Scranton and in Germany, you were pretty much in your room the whole time.
yeah, I was like locked. I'm like, what is this? Do I not get to enjoy iron conferences? I have to be in lockdown each time this happens. So hopefully, so I feel like I need a Germany redo at some point as well.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I do too because the residency I did in Helmson, I stayed sick pretty much with a cold the whole entire time because it was what, July or something, and I went to Iceland first, then Amsterdam, then on into Germany, and
Oh, that's a major temperature shift.
I think that shift sort of messed all of us up or something or it was just somebody brought a bug and we were all kind of sick, but it was
That's
crazy.
in Latvia too. Everybody was sick in Latvia. It was crazy because yeah, we all got sick. Like they all had colds. My stomach was angry for some reason. Like I was better off than the rest of my group, but like they all had this like hardcore cold, and everybody was just kind of like locked up in the attic with the cold, and I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm. And that was really when I first post the international cast iron conference in Scranton. I started having some of come to find out I have scoliosis, which but that ended up causing problems once I got to Germany, and then by the start of that semester in college, I was completely like flat on my back, pretty much. So
Yeah, well, also being on the plane for all those hours with that too, that's really tough,
yeah,
because when you have like chronic back stuff, which I totally relate, I have it too. Not scoliosis, I've got that ankylosing spondylitis, but yeah, it's tough to manage. You got to make sure that you're like up and stretching every so often, and but thank God for physical therapy. Oh my
mhm.
God.
Yeah, for sure. And like you've been a huge proponent for like you need to go to the hospital or have you checked in with your doctor? And so I really appreciate you being sort of like my cheerleader or there to put a boot up my ass when I need it.
No, anytime. I do that. I don't do it with just you too. I do it with our friend Gabby and Emily. Like when I found out she got injured, I was like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, you know,
Yep, for sure. It's
we love
crazy.
y'all too much. I don't want to see anything bad happen.
Mhm. And in general, I don't know if this is across the board with all of the art world. I feel like that there's some enclaves where there's trade secrets that nobody talks about and stuff, but within the sculpture realm, at least all the friends I've made, it becomes sort of like a big family or a wolf pack or something like that, and we all have each other's backs, and it's kind of easy to pick up where you left off, even if you haven't, especially with COVID, it
Mhm.
kind of shut down everything that we do. And so it's like, as we're slowly getting back to stuff, it's like picking up right where you left off.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think it's just like, with sculpture, because it's so physical, you eventually do need other people to help you do something.
Mm.
And it's just kind of like, it's not an easy medium either. There's a lot of trial and error with it. Sorry, I'm going to crap on painting for a second, but it's not like painting where, you can like put something down and then it not work out and you can just cover over it. With sculpture, it's like, oh crap, I made this physical thing. It exists now. What do I do with this thing? And,
Right.
you know,
And it takes up
um,
space.
it takes up space and it's here now. So, you know, um, but eventually we have to kind of like figure that out. And with things like iron pours or even glass casting, you need a group in order to get it done.
Mhm.
And I think that's why we have a tendency to bond and, just kind of have that community aspect. But even with my classes that are more like 2D focused, I tell them that too. I said, look, we're a team here. We're here to help each other grow. That's the theme of the class, growth. And, I'm going to grow from you. You're going to grow from me. And, we're here for each other. We're not here being malicious. We're here just trying to learn,
Yeah.
So I just think that's how it is in life. You just got to, come together and, it's all about learning. You're forever a student.
Mm-hmm. 100%. That's an awesome takeaway for sure from this conversation, if anything else. So within sculpture, especially and art across the board, a lot of things have a significant carbon footprint. Do you
Mhm.
think that we are going to start seeing shifts in how we do things? I know that there's some people, they're creating furnaces that are vegetable oil using recycled oil and stuff like that instead of
Mhm.
propane and things like that. How do you think we're going to start navigating some of that while still maintaining the process as it kind of is? Because like the resins are super toxic and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's good that this stuff is happening. I think that it needs to happen because, climate change is very real, and I think we need to do what we can. So I think things more like recyclable methods to make molds. I think that's going to become really important. The work like that Becca Fliss was doing with, the dung molds, I
Mhm.
think potentially things like that, or, other versions of that are going to be happening in the future. More veggie oil furnaces, like I know Stephen Coles just did a furnace for Mary Neubauer out in Phoenix. And
Oh,
then,
nice.
we got our pal Christian Benefield doing stuff like that, and Jeremy and Whistle up in upstate New York, and it's good that we're seeing that, and I hope we see more of that. I hope it becomes a regular thing that, the furnaces are run on veggie oil and not propane. And we're subbing Coke out, because those seem to be like the really bad things in particular. Um, but yeah, I'm all for all the sustainable foundry methods. That'd be great to see more of that.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, making it more accessible to every size, shape, and ability, and then also making it a little bit less toxic. Because I
Oh,
definitely would like to not have allergy hives and bumps all over my body and the respiratory issues I get.
oh, for sure, for sure. And then you also mentioned accessible foundry, which I think like absolutely, needs to happen. I have a dream where I'd love to see people in like wheelchairs being able to do a ladle. Like I want to
Hmm.
see that. Like, I want to see anybody, that wants to come in and pour iron to be able to do that,
Hmm.
I know whenever I'm in an iron pour, there's certain jobs I can't do because, I have this 4'11" frame. So charging's really hard because it's like over my head. Um,
Right.
so I tend to, I can do, helping run the furnace from the bottom part. And then I can do, skimming, and I can do safety and lifting the ladle. I'd probably need a lot of extra help just because my back's not so great these days. So I'd probably need a second person for me to do like a live or a dead end. But there's plenty of other things I can do. And then one thing I've also noticed that I can do because the teaching is I can help kind of manage people, like, say, okay, here's the next poor team. Okay, you're over here.
Mhm.
Are you feeling okay? Swapping out the people and just kind of watching to make sure all the operations are functioning smoothly.
Right. And that's so crucial because a lot of times I've seen folks end up being sort of a team captain or something like that, and they don't even really understand all of the intricacies of an iron pour, and then things get out of whack and stuff like that. So having someone with your knowledge is really super critical, at least from a furnace person's perspective, because in the blink of an eye, tragedy can really strike, and we've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, it happens really quick, and it's really important just to have, eyes on the field that know, what's going on or can kind of anticipate, oh, someone's going to jump into this or do
Mhm.
this. I need to stop it,
Yeah.
being proactive during an iron pour is important
Mhm.
because you also have most of the times we have people that are new. So you really have to watch the new folks and make sure that they're okay. And you also have to anticipate for people panicking too.
Right.
So Sculpture people, for the most part, we tend to be calm, cool, and collective because if you're not, like if all of a sudden, you're like screaming at people, what's going to happen when you're pouring something? You're like, oh, so
Mhm.
you have to be like, hey, so I'm going to do this and this is what's going to happen and we're going to do this. And
Yeah.
then that seems to be better than panic because, you and I unfortunately experienced somebody that was extremely unnecessarily panicky during an iron pour and
Yeah.
that had to get shut down pretty fast. So,
Mhm. And I mean, within my lineage of iron casting, I grew up sort of in the rough and tumble area of it. Like I've been doing it since I was 13. So, you know, seeing the different vibes, I think that's something that I really appreciate with you and Christian Benefield, especially, is y'all run super chill and safe tours. I experienced that at Salem Artworks with Michael Baldeo too. It was just a totally different, instead of like, one of the terms that Christian always says is you don't have to be a Viking, and basically like forcing your way through stuff, dealing with the pain or dehydration or something like that. And that started shifting a lot for me, just
mhm.
in general, even how I approached life, because I was always that person that would tough it out, to continue pushing through, and it's really took a toll on my body. So I definitely appreciate that y'all have like curated or at least created this environment that is really nice and at least relaxed. And we can't control all of the variables, certainly, but at least we can control our emotions and bodies in the situation as much as possible.
Exactly. I definitely second Christian being a great pour organizer. And, I really enjoy pouring with him and, that group down there because, yeah, it's always very much like a, you do what you can kind of situation. And, because there's so much of that, that kind of like Viking, you got to push through thing. But like, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what good are you going to be to anybody if you push yourself to the point where you're like land yourself in the hospital?
Yeah.
How is that going to, do well if you're like getting dehydrated? You know, what's going to happen if you faint during the middle of the iron pour?
Right.
you know, because then that's going to create a whole other series of chaotic events, during the middle of the pour. And
Mhm.
because then you have like an active furnace going and then someone passed out, and then all of a sudden, you're shorthanded. So, it's really important just to kind of like pace yourself during the pour and make sure you're all right so you
Mhm.
don't, get yourself landed or sick. So that's why I'm like very particular about when I'm pouring too. Like I don't want to pour in extreme heat because there was one time I
Yeah.
did give myself heat exhaustion, pretty bad. It took me about a week to bounce back from that. And
Mhm.
then, you know, um, yeah, there's just been times I've just burnt the candle at both ends, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be worth any. Well, I'm not going to be able to help anyone if I'm like this. So,
Yep. I totally agree. I've had to pull out of more iron pourers in the past 3 or 4 years than I've wanted to, but it's better to be able to make sure that the crew is safe and not having to, take care of me. And I also don't want to feel bad by being sidelined or not being helpful. So,
mhm. Yeah. I think it's important just to make sure like everybody involved with the poor is being valued, even those people that are sidelined,
Mhm.
because like what if you're the person yelling at everybody to stay hydrated, or
Yep.
you're the person keeping time, which is super crucial with the furnace. Or if you're somebody that's even like narrating the iron pour to a crowd, all the jobs are important,
Mhm. Yep, very much so. And I just can't wait to see what it continues to grow and become because it I know within my college experience, it started dwindling down to, if you're not using plastics or silicones or going with Arduinos and learning the newest laser cutting, you're kind of becoming obsolete. But it's kind of in my mission or whatever to keep some of the old skills alive. And so I'm really excited to see how it starts to evolve and transition as we go forward.
Well, I mean, something I've been seeing in education is that a lot of the students still want to know the older way of doing stuff or like the more traditional way of making something. Like every semester, when I say, we're going to weld, they're like, oh my God, I get to wear the gear and I get to weld and I get to do all, and then they get the angle grinder out. And they're like, I feel so cool. Like, it's like, you don't want to get rid of that, and like in the wood shop where you're built, like you need both. Like I honestly think like the analog is super handy knowing that those basic skills, but like, and the digital's great for, kind of streamlining things and sometimes the digital stuff does make my life a little bit easier as far as building stuff, but
Right.
I still need both. Like I'll make something digitally, but I got to put it together still. And it's not going to always be like hot glue, like
Yep.
hot glue is good for some things. It's not like the fix all for everything.
Hmm.
Oh, love hot glue for mold making. But you need both. Like I think, and I think that also, and forgive me if I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I think that also falls into the argument of conceptual art versus maker heavy art. Like I think you need a good 50-50. Like you need to be able to make good concepts about your work and talk about it. And then I think you also need to make well as well,
Hmm.
and you need both.
Yeah. Because it seems like sometimes you lose the emotion because things become so thought out and this has to be a certain way and stuff like that. So my work has always been quite emotional. It's I take pictures of Bethlehem at this old steel mill and try to retell the stories and the whispers of the ghosts that are there and stuff like that. So it's like you can't really put that into a digital file, so to speak.
Yeah. You really can't. It's like I can understand making a component of that, but like not like you still have to use your hands to work it, and most of my students, like I'll notice they'll start something off digital and then they'll really, work on it. So I think that, a lot of this generation coming up here, I go sounding really old again, but I think a lot of them are really thinking about like the analog too. They're definitely kind of thinking about both.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't know if you've found this, but it's like half the time I feel like I can do things a lot quicker with my hands
Hmm.
than and it's a switch because it's
Yeah.
like the next generation. And by the way, when did we get so old?
It it just comes quick. I mean, like, because 10 years ago, I feel like, that was when it was kind of like millennial prime time.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, we've got the Gen Z folks coming up, and the game has changed. And I
Mhm.
think it's important to acknowledge that, especially when you're teaching too, because I've had some people that were of different generations that I know, and they're like very much like, "This is my way," and I was like, "Okay, but, like, your way may have worked then, it might not work now."
Mhm.
Because I've noticed I've had to kind of, like, alter the way I teach a bit, as, I'm getting older. So,
Yeah.
the students keep you on your toes, that's for sure.
Oh, 100%. And that's something that I try to create in my classroom is like a safe space for all genders, so that it's affirming to however they are, because in that time period, that age group, it's really crucial for them to sort of explore and express. And they're coming out of being in their parents' house or whatever, and they're exploring a lot of things. How do you, I know you provide that safe space as well. How has that been for you?
I mean, it's been good. Like I feel like the students positively respond to that because they're coming to class. Like, of course, they're shy at first for the most part. Usually around midterms when I see people start to like kind of open up and like joke around and become more comfortable with each other. And then like by the end, they're exchanging numbers and becoming friends. And um it's teaching them to grow up more because like I've also noticed too, like it kind of depends on, how instructors like to run their courses. Like at the end of the day, even if I have students that are like dual enrolled high school students, I pretty much put this, assumption across like, hey, you all are adults. I'm treating you as adults. Like here's the curriculum, here's the deadlines, and you have X amount of time to accomplish these things. If they're goofing around and they're kind of like, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then, the proof comes in the pudding when the project comes out. Because
Right.
if it looks, like last minute or just, not really well thought out, then, they're not going to get a good grade. And, so I tend to put a lot of responsibility on the students because, I feel like if I'm hounding them like a parent would, or
Right.
being like, you need to really get this done, it's I don't think it's going to be effective because I feel
Mm.
like they're gonna essentially just kind of resent me, for being like that. So I tend to be like, all right, well, when the project's due,
Mhm.
this is what needs to get done. So, come up with a timeline. And, I always tell the students too, I'm like, if this is your first 3D type class, multiply what it would take you to do a 2D project by 2. And that's what you have for a 3D
Mhm.
project.
If
It's
if you're
gravity.
still on a nice timeline, if that's not indicating any mess ups or like
Oh yeah,
restarts.
this is when you're like, yeah, exactly, because you have to anticipate when things go wrong. Like it doesn't always work out well. Sometimes you need to redo
Yeah.
something. Like I pretty much redid my entire thesis before I showed it.
Right.
Because I had kind of like a rough plan, like springs or I'm sorry, fall semester before I graduated, what I was going to do. I made a whole bunch of stuff. I put it in the gallery and I showed my committee. And then I actually had stuff on the side that I kind of started that I was more excited about. And then
Hmm.
I took him in the studio and I said, so I've been doing this in secret. And then they said, okay, do that. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to do it. And then I did. And then I went berserk and made like a ton of new work in, a very short period of time. And, I had to fill a really big gallery, but I did. And I was happy I did that. So
That sounds so much like my story. It's crazy. At least you had a gallery. Mine was just in
I
the
know you had the COVID. You had the COVID graduation.
It's all right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. It's been a pleasure talking to you and having you on this new podcast. I had you on it, I think, once or twice with the Instagram Live. So it's great to have you back. And I can't wait to come up see the cats and visit with you in person again.
Yes, that will be excellent. Can't wait for that too.
Yeah. Well, have a great day and I will chat with you later.
All right. Sounds good, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to send a huge thank you out to Katie Hovencamp for jumping on as my first interviewee for the Igniting the Flame series on my podcast, and the patience exhibited as we navigated many technical difficulties, like the microphone totally kicking the bucket. But it's always a pleasure to sit down and have a chat with her. You've been listening to the Stop, Breathe, Feel, Create podcast. Check out the show notes for details on how to learn more about Katie Hovenkamp's work, as well as links to find out what's happening in my world, from events that I'll be at to how you can work with me one-on-one. So you can start living authentically and with abundance this year while deepening your connection to self and community through creativity, mindfulness, and nature. That's all for now. Tune in next time and don't forget to check out Lauren G. Koch, Keeper of the Old Ways, across social media, including YouTube and Patreon, where you'll be able to access even more inspiring and educational content. And plus, when you become a supporter, you're also fueling the ongoing creation of content just like this. Many blessings, and don't forget to stop, breathe, feel, create.